Are you ready, Maestro? Are you ready, Maestro?
I certainly am.
Great. Well, let's get started. Our first podcast. This is exciting. We we've been talking about doing this for a while, but maybe you can tell the folks at home why the two of us, and I'm Jackson, you're Maestro, why we're doing a podcast.
Well, we've been friends for 12 or 13 years, and I met you when you were a senior in high school and you were conducting already and writing plays and whatnot. And I'm in the room now where you were looking at my theatrical books and I said, what kid in high school knows the plays of Tennessee Williams? So you're a very special person. And I am an interesting classical music conductor because I like pop music, going back to whatever.
Well, I think one of the things that struck me when we first met was that you were so interested in so many different things outside of classical music. And typically, when people think of classical conductors or musicians, sometimes even like theater artists and ballet dancers get this, I know for sure, where it's like they assume that your whole world is just that thing and that you're snooty against anything that's not it. And there's like a cliche, of course, about like classical musicians don't like Broadway music or pop music. But you sort of broke that because like the more that we started talking, like you were interested, like you love Broadway musicals. That was another
Yes.
thing that we bonded over. But yeah, and just for the folks at home, like I call Bill almost every morning of my life, and we just talk about the random topics that we want to talk about. And so we thought we'd finally record it and find out what other sick individuals like this stuff that we like. Um,
Yeah, my career as a conductor has been about American music, the classics,
mhm.
and trying to bring to the public's attention unjustly neglected music of all genres.
But also like the great stories, which is kind of where this podcast came from, was just like the stories behind some of the things that we know in culture or maybe need to know about. I don't know, because you and I both love history too. It's like when you study, when we study world history and American history, we're supposed to find trends and things like that. But when it comes to like pop culture history, it's so subjective to how we've grown up, or what we were listening to as kids. But then as we'll find out as we start to do more of these, like there's a lot of patterns, like everything old is new again all the time when it comes to music and such. What do you think?
Well, right. And I believe whenever you have a masterpiece by a genius or a very, very talented person, there's 90% of the time a backstory where they were triggered to do something special.
Yeah, nothing was an accident.
No, no.
Except as we'll find, like we'll most likely do a Bach episode, and that just is like a gift from God accident, kind of stuff. But we're the topics we're talking about in the show are common things that people know in pop culture, also unjustly neglected things, not just classical music. We'll talk about musicals, we'll talk about movies. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about all the great masterpieces of culture.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this. You and I have talked so many times about how great and how profound even the
Hmm.
sound of music is, the musical. Well,
Yeah.
everybody set off as a kid's thing, and here's the Lederhosen and the cows and all that. But no, it says a lot, as does The Wizard of Oz, for instance.
Yeah. As does Handel's Messiah, as does Beethoven 9. It is, and it is that thing where it's like you don't have to be a certain, type of person or have a certain degree. Like you can appreciate these things for what they are. But it's also better when you know a little bit of history about them. So,
Right.
um, but it's January when we're recording this, and I figured for our first one we do a little holiday hangover and talk about something that probably a lot of people were surrounded by over Christmas and the holidays, which is the Nutcracker. So we're going to deep dive into Nutcracker today, which is really exciting. And we were talking about the other day how it feels like the Nutcracker has always been in our lives. It's in everybody's life, but it was a relatively new thing for America. I mean, it didn't come to New York City Ballet via Balanchine till 1954, but it had been around right before then. I mean, what was your sort of personal connection to the Nutcracker?
Well, everyone of my generation that loved classical music grew up with a LP, Leonard Bernstein and the New York Philharmonic. On one side was the Nutcracker Suite, the other side was Prokofiev, Peter and the Wolf. So I fell in love with the suite as everyone did. And I was a viola player, mainly as an instrumentalist in high school. And I was in a very good group called the Pittsburgh Youth Symphony, which cheated in that it allowed in college age students. So it
Mhm.
was a fine sounding ensemble. So we did a complete Nutcracker with the Pittsburgh Ballet. And of course, I'm in love with the piece. I have a score, I'm studying it. And then finally, I get a chance to conduct it when I'm 29. And it turned out to be one of the most satisfying experiences of my life. But it's not an easy thing to conduct. Most people don't know how easy conducting is. If
Yeah.
you're conducting a Mozart symphony, frankly, you start them and then, you leave them alone.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
in
it's
the
yeah,
first
because
act,
it doesn't change tempi much as other symphonists do, or let alone a ballet where you're constantly moving and changing to fit the choreography, which is also based on the dancers. So, absolutely.
it's difficult. It's difficult. I think in the first act of Nutcracker alone, there's 30 potential train wrecks if the conductor's not concentrating. And you're right, the conductor has to watch the dancers too at certain moments
Hmm.
because you need to watch their feet if they have a different idea of the tempo, the entrances. So I enjoyed really the first one and the 100th performance too.
Yeah.
Never got tired of it.
Was it also true like with your generation, like Fantasia had some of the Nutcracker in it as well? I mean, do you remember seeing Fantasia and noticing that music, or
Oh,
where
yeah.
else, I guess, did Nutcracker show up in sort of pop culture at your time? I don't think Bernstein ever did a young people's concert of it, did he?
He did Swan Lake, as we know, but I don't
That's
think
right.
or
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty. So that's a good point. I'm yeah, the Fantasia I saw at some point. I don't remember how young I was, but that was a daring thing that Walt Disney put together with Leopold Stokowski. And mind you, one of the pieces they did was an excerpt from Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, which must
Right.
have sounded like, the earth is blowing up to those people only
Yeah.
20 years after the premiere. So it was very daring, very beautifully done, and sure, very, very memorable.
I remember it in Fantasia 2000 as well. I remember seeing the original Fantasia in school and hearing the Sugar Plum Fairy dance.
Mhm.
But then for my generation, the Macaulay Culkin New York City Ballet feature film came out, and that was just a big thing because we had grown up on Home Alone and Home Alone 2. So to see Macaulay Culkin as the
Yeah.
Nutcracker Prince, and it was, it was a big deal. I mean, it came out in theaters, nationwide, and I remember we rented the uh a VHS of it from Blockbuster at one point. So it was always there. It was always there. Nutcracker was always there, as it is with all of us here, especially in America. So,
And it's one of those classical pieces that is a family piece.
hmm.
It's not too long, and it's a fairy tale, and they're kids
Yeah,
in Act One. So, and there's some people that never go to the ballet except to
right.
see the Nutcracker with the family. Like certain people only go to church on Easter Sunday.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that the other day where, this might be the only ballet that someone hears or sees in their entire lifetime.
Right.
So it's so significant in that way. And we'll talk about it later, but how it became such a staple. But I think one of the things that I is was really interesting as we were planning this was 1954, it premieres at New York City Ballet. This has been around for what, almost 100 years before, maybe half century, um,
Or 80 years.
80 years, yeah. And so, like, Tchaikovsky is known as a ballet composer, like you mentioned Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake. Um, But what was it like? I mean, what was it like before Tchaikovsky when it came to ballet music in particular? Like,
Well,
could you break down to the audience like why what came before and so why was Tchaikovsky so unique?
ballet companies start to sprout up mainly in France, eventually Italy, not in England, and Russia around 1860 or so. And the music that was used was not listened to. It was mainly supposed to be rhythmic and maybe memorable,
Hmm.
but it was something like the way people don't like certain types of movie music that does
Yeah.
not wear well or stand alone by itself without the scenes. So there were no great composers that tried their hand at it. When Beethoven was very young, he did something. Mozart was very young, but a serious composer would not touch doing a ballet. But in France, where ballet started to make real money, the talented people like Delibes, Adolphe Adam, Giselle, Delibes, Coppelia, started to write music that was more complicated, and they were criticized for writing music that was not boom, bump, boom, bump, and that was it.
Yeah.
So Tchaikovsky loved ballet music of that sort, and when he had a chance to write the ballet Swan Lake, it's an amazing 3 hour piece. And one of the highlights of my entire life was when my mom let me stay home from school one day because I had a bad cold. She never let me stay home from school, but
Hmm.
I must have looked green or something on that occasion. So I had from the Pittsburgh Library 4 discs, LP discs of the complete Swan Lake. And I think it was one of the most happy afternoons of my life because I was 14 and old enough to get it the first time. It's not complicated music. And so when I made my conducting debut at age 15, the music director was smart enough to let me choose my own music,
Hmm.
and I did a suite from Swan Lake. So Tchaikovsky has always been a soulmate composer for me. I'm
Yeah.
sure for you too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think my first of his outside of Nutcracker was Capriccio Italiane. I remember we did that in band, a band arrangement of it. And there was a CD of it was like the Great Composers series, and it was the CD, and it might have been RCA or somebody, but it had sort of the greatest hits of all these composers, and that's how I found like there was just a picture of them and then their names. So it was like Gershwin, and it was Rhapsody in Blue, American in Paris, Concerto in F, Porgy and Bess
Yeah.
Symphonic Portrait. Tchaikovsky, it was Capriccio Italiane, I think, a mini suite from Swan Lake, and then the Pathetique.
Okay.
So I remember hearing all of that very early on, and I was so struck by how melodic he is and like sustained melody over a course of time. One thing though that's interesting is like in my time when I was working at a ballet company, like exploring other ballet composers like Delibes and Adam and Minkus.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's almost like they're afraid of a very constructed melody. So you get all these little mini melodies in like a gallop that's usually like a minute, minute and a half. Or but and I even found some of the like slower ballads and such a little, boring. And so it made you miss, Tchaikovsky, so it was almost like once you hear that kind of ballet, once you hear something like Swan Lake and Nutcracker, of course everything pairs in comparison. So
You mentioned melody. For me and you, I think melody is the center of our love for all kinds of music. And I found a great quote or two about this. The criticisms of Tchaikovsky's music are based on the myth that beauty and artistic worth are in some profound way connected with what is hidden and difficult, and that therefore all which is immediately pleasing and accessible must, of its very essence, be inferior. So if it's simple, if it's too popular, where Cary Grant never got an Academy Award, if you make too much money, people are suspicious about that.
right.
And the Schoenberg's famous quote, if it is popular, it is not good. And if it is good, it is not popular. So there's a snobism that we've all seen. You're right. Classical people just look down on pop music before they hear it. and vice versa. Everyone's in their little cubicle, so sure that theirs is the best music. And I used to be that way. Remember, you introduced me to, wait for it, ABBA. I had never heard
Yes.
ABBA.
Well, reintroduced. You had heard it before, but you had never listened to it.
Well,
Yes.
well, exactly, exactly. And I started to analyze it. And I mean, yeah, yeah, melody is king.
I think one thing that's interesting, because I want to stay on melody just to say that, with Tchaikovsky, it's always, I hate to say it like this, but always good tunes. I mean, Swan Lake as well, it's just hit after hit
Yeah.
after hit after hit. And when you think of Nutcracker and how much great music is in it, um, it's incredible. I mean, that these things have lived on and are literally in our collective, brain as a culture of what the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy music is. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, you know?
It really is. And I have this Stravinsky quote. I may have misattributed the other one, but Stravinsky worshipped Tchaikovsky, even saw him once at a concert.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
he said about Tchaikovsky, this is Stravinsky talking, Tchaikovsky possessed the power of melody, which is an extremely rare and precious gift. Melody is the center of gravity in every symphony, opera, or ballet composed by him. So, what is a great melody? I can't analyze that. I obviously I've tried to analyze that, and I have some ideas about contrast and similarity, but it's a mystery why something is memorable or a $2 tune becomes something that you have in your soul forever.
Yeah, you just know it when you hear it, I think. I think you know a good melody when you hear it. Yeah, and it's easy to say that, but also, to know that, I mean, that Tchaikovsky, yeah, you just know that they're all good tunes and melodies. I want to go back to sort of what Nutcracker was based on because it had its roots in a fairy tale, in the Hoffman fairy tale. Am I correct?
E.T.A. Hoffman, 19th century, famous for his sarcasm and weird, sinister, fantastical things. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Everyone thinks it's a grim fairy tale, but I mean, it's very dark. I mean, it's very dark for even for Hoffman standards. It's very, and for those who don't know Hoffman, you can watch The Tales of Hoffman, the Offenbach opera, or the great Powell and Pressburger movie musical based on it to get a little taste of what his sinisterness was like.
he
Yeah.
was known for the sinister, dark, weird adult elements. For instance, we like the cute little mice in that
Hmm.
one, and the Mouse King. Well, in this version, the Mouse King is ferocious and has 7 heads. You
Yes.
would never see that in a ballet presentation because the kids would go nuts.
Right, right. Yeah, it's this weird like and he describes it, if I'm not mistaken, as like they've all this might be a little graphic, but they've all like mutated together over time. So
Okay.
he has
Okay.
like 7 heads. It's something very grotesque. And then Dumas did an adaptation.
Alexander Dumas, the father, I don't know the heritage of that family. It
Hmm.
was the son and the
Yeah.
father. So he liked this, but he made a version, a soft, gentle, sensitive version for children,
Mm.
his book of fairy tales.
Yeah.
And that's really
Glad
what,
he glad he fixed that up because
yeah, and made it shorter. And
okay,
so
good.
that's what the ballet is based on. And
Hmm.
a famous choreographer, Petipa, came to Tchaikovsky with this idea. It wasn't Tchaikovsky's idea.
Hmm.
And he said, "What do you think about it?" And he said, "I don't like it at all." Well,
Yeah.
give it some thought. And why didn't he like it? As some critics have pointed out, Swan Lake is really, with its lovely, lighthearted moments, is still a very tragic, romantic love story that ends very sadly. So there's a
Yeah.
depth there. Even
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty, which is more of a fairy tale, has a witch, a really, really
Yes.
scary witch.
Yeah.
So and a genuine plot and transformation of characters, character
Mhm.
motivation and whatnot. There's a journey there. There's no journey really, or there's a minor one in Nutcracker. There's the kids around the Christmas tree, And then at night, the mice become soldiers, and Clara fantasizes that one becomes a Nutcracker Prince. That's Act One, pretty much. And then
Yeah.
Act Two, the Nutcracker Prince and Clara go to the land of the sweets, and there's no plot there at all. What happens
Right.
is that the local inhabitants portray exotic characters and dances in this. And this, of course, is based on the ballet tradition called the divertissement,
Hmm.
from the word to divert. It has nothing to do with the plot. And so it's like you read about the vaudeville and early Broadway musicals. There had to be the specialty number for the comic. There had to be the
Right.
specialty number for the little girl with her dog.
Yeah.
There was time out from the plot.
Yeah, or as we like to say, there's always a second couple in every musical comedy that has to be the exact opposite or comedic relief from the central love story. Yeah, I mean that's what's so fascinating about the divertissement is like, and of course many of them were problematic, right? If they're showing, different parts of the world and things like that, but it was just such a common.
Racist.
Well, I mean, we are talking about Nutcrackers, so we can get into that. Um, but yeah, it's always been a standard part of entertainment for ballet. I mean, Swan Lake has a whole act,
True.
basically, right? That's
Right.
divertissement.
Right. So
Yeah.
these were long evenings, and people expected to see their favorite stars do their specialty act. So that was a convention that they all had to deal with. So Tchaikovsky was very proud of being a craftsman.
Hmm.
You give me the assignment, and I will do a great job on it. It's like some people like, well, in this case, Petipa told Tchaikovsky exactly what he wanted. I want a march of 100 bars duration in a fast tempo. I
Hmm.
want a waltz in 300 bars of a. It's really quite an analysis, a synopsis, I should say.
Yeah.
And some people would be angered at this. For instance, we know that movie composers sometimes get really mad when the director cuts up their music and makes it inaudible. On TV today, on Turn to Classics, they're playing On the Waterfront,
Hmm. Yeah.
Band's
Famous.
masterpiece. Well, Bernstein, the young Bernstein, wrote the music for this, and he never wrote for a film again. And I think he won the Academy Award for On the Waterfront. Not sure.
Yes, and like you said, they significantly cut, and I think if I'm not mistaken, also turned it down. From what I understand, of one account is that they turned the music down so you can barely hear it, and it's what a travesty. Yeah.
So he never did another one. Of course, the story of Copeland is somewhat similar. He won the Academy Award for a movie called The Heiress,
Hmm.
and the director completely messed with the music and threw out some of his music and added music by another composer and arranger. So
Yeah.
so Tchaikovsky didn't expect the worst to happen, but he did say, I like having a structure, and I like the challenge. He was the person that said, I do not wait for inspiration to hit me. You
Yeah.
write every day and you become a craftsman. Stravinsky was the same way. So he himself had a poor opinion of his music for this, which is shocking
Hmm.
uh, because it's a masterpiece. There's not one weak bar in it, but he may have felt that compared to the serious elements of the other
Hmm.
two ballets, that Nutcracker was lacking. But he never came around to the idea that this also was a masterpiece, and it was not considered to be a masterpiece during his lifetime.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I can't get over what you had told me that he didn't want to write it and yet still did. What was sort of what ultimately convinced him to keep writing?
That's a good question. I think it was partially, well, it was he was working with the greatest choreographer in Russia, and this is for the greatest theater in
Mhm.
St. Petersburg, as I recall. So
Mhm.
it was quite an honor to be asked. And the royalty would go to these ballet performances. In fact, the Tsar himself attended the dress rehearsal of Nutcracker. It's like the President of the United States attending a dress rehearsal. So there's a lot of honor involved.
Mhm.
and he thought of himself as being a craftsman. And mind you, um, the money didn't hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So at this point in his life, he had been supported by a patroness who freed him from having to teach in the college in the conservatory. But she decided not to subsidize him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to accept assignments that maybe weren't top level for him.
Yeah.
But here's one thing that I didn't know about for sure. The suite, you would think, of course, was put together after the premiere of the whole ballet. That's always what's done with what? Music, movie scores.
Yep. Yeah, they'll take excerpts from the movie soundtrack and either rearrange it or cut it down, write new, beginnings, endings, and then yeah, farm it out to orchestras and such as a way for them to play it more often. Mhm.
So, always without exception, the full opera or incidental music or ballet comes first. This didn't happen in this case. Now, bear with me on this story, but I'm intrigued by this. He wrote a tone poem, his very last tone poem called The Voivode. It's about a man who catches his wife cheating.
Mhm.
He comes into their bedroom, sees her with a young man, and raises his gun to shoot them both. And then his servant shoots him. Now, why he would do a tone poem with this really crazy subject, some people speculate he was so mad at his patroness for dumping him and lying about the reason. But at any
Yeah.
rate, so nothing has ever happened like this. He conducted the premiere on the first half. Comes the intermission, he's in the conductor's room. He takes the score and tries to completely destroy it.
Okay.
He's still sweating from conducting the premiere of this.
How long was this tone poem, by the way? Because
About
for
14
folk,
minutes. About
yeah, for
14
folks
minutes.
at home, tone poems usually are based on a concept like summertime on the river and the park at sunset. And here he is doing a three-act, soap opera. And again, wordless, just music
Yep.
with all that drama. That's just wild. Sorry, I just had to put that
No,
out there.
thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
So the librarian comes into the room and he sees Tchaikovsky, trying to destroy it.
Hmm.
And he says, Tchaikovsky said, I want you to collect all the orchestral parts and I want you to destroy them in front of me. I don't want to ever hear this piece again or hear of it. And the man says, I have no time during this intermission to collect all the orchestral parts.
Yeah.
I promise you I will destroy them. But he didn't.
Okay.
By the way, it's a pretty good piece. It's a pretty good
Okay.
piece.
What
I
is
would
it?
say,
What is it called for the folks at home?
yeah, The Voivode.
The Voivode.
A
Okay.
voivode. There's an opera by him called that too, so it's a little confusing. But this is the tone poem version. So,
Okay.
so this voivode was to be performed a couple months down the road, but Tchaikovsky was not going to allow that to happen. So he
Yeah.
needed a substitute. So the ballet Nutcracker hadn't been performed yet, but it had been orchestrated. So he chose something like seven selections
Yeah.
for this Nutcracker suite.
Is there something in that suite that still surprises you that he chose? Because let's also be clear, like what was in the suite. It was a lot of obviously the overture, the march, probably Waltz of the Flowers, and some of the, famous candy dances. So I know
Divertissement, the chocolate dance,
Yeah,
the Chinese dance, the
right.
Arabian dance.
Is there still one of those selections in there that surprises you? Or maybe one from the ballet that you think should be in there?
Well, there is a second Nutcracker suite, but it wasn't put together by Tchaikovsky. Everything is a highlight, I think, of the
Yeah,
Nutcracker. But he
right.
at the time chose it. What surprised me most was when
Hmm.
I did a real deep dive into the overture,
Yeah.
which only Mozart could have written because it sounds so elegant and it's not, there's a difference between simple and simple-minded or simple and trivial.
Well, it's not pandering, right? Like it's not even a standard ballet overture. And again, you know those if you've heard 5,000 of them, but it's kind of like, an overture to a Broadway show, like whatever a cheesy thing, bum
Boom.
bum 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 bum, like those like you know the cheesy, standard, typical cliche things as you hear them, but yeah, this is not it at all.
No, and think of it. The audience is noisy
And it starts quiet.
and it starts
It
quiet.
starts quiet. Also, there's no music from the ballet in the overture. What's that about? It's a totally different tune, right? Ish.
That's a good point. Some composers, even as early as Mozart, included in the overture some thematic substance from the
Right.
work to come.
Right.
Swan Lake is a good example of that. It
Hmm.
begins with the swan
Yep.
theme,
Yep. Exactly.
and
You
then
hear it
Sleeping
right out the
Beauty.
gate. Yep.
And Sleeping Beauty begins with the witch's theme, and then goes
Hmm.
right into
Hmm.
the fairies theme. So that's a good point. What I took for granted and didn't realize was, well, first of all, what should an overture to a fairy tale sound like? Swan Lake is serious. This is
Yeah.
serious. So I think we're talking about light textures,
Hmm.
no bass instruments, nothing dark and foreboding. So he eliminates the basses entirely. The
Hmm.
cellos, which are a bass instrument partially, are only playing in the higher register. There are no trombones, no tuba,
Yep.
trumpets, and only two French horns. So it's a
Yeah.
very light classical Mozartian orchestra.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
because there are no bass instruments, it seems to float and have an ethereal fairy tale presence. So this guy is a genius. Not only is he thinking of that, he's
Yes.
writing notes that portray all of that.
Well, and we've talked about, the fact that it's a child's view of reality, the
Right.
entire ballet. And so, he does a really great job keeping it light, and very childlike. I mean, very youthful in spirit. I mean, if you can think about the march, dun da 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 dun 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 dun, right? It's very up and perky and youthful and
Turkey.
joyous.
Yes.
And even, I'm always struck in the presentation of the toys music, when the soldier music comes out, and it's not for both. It's not too scary, right? Like the mice section is very scary. The growing of the tree even is very scary and overwhelming. But that's sort of again that youthfulness, that very innocent sound. He even he doesn't present danger when a toy is dancing, a toy soldier is dancing, right? But he sort of invites a little bit of that. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant. Yeah.
Even, well, you look at the other battle scenes in his music, the 1812 Overture, for instance,
Mhm.
some things in the
Right.
Manfred, those are obviously incredibly scary. And the Battle of the Mice is also scary, but it's
Really terrifying
yeah,
music.
but it's
Yeah.
not satanic or like whatever.
No, no, no. But it's very like you had mentioned Hansel and Gretel. It's like the witches, the witches' flight from Hansel and Gretel a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
no, 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 no. Go ahead.
One thing that I don't think even your most avid music lover knows about Nutcracker is it was premiered on a double bill.
I was just about to get to that. Yeah, it's crazy what the double bill was. A
A,
ballet and an opera.
a 2 hour ballet and a 2.5 hour opera. What? That's a long evening. But the evenings were long in those days. The French operas
Hmm.
were 5 acts. So it was an evening at the theater. So people expected that. But already there's a problem here. The opera people don't much care for ballet, and the ballet people don't much care for the opposite.
Yes.
So that was a problem for a lot of people at the premiere of Porgy and Bess. The opera people didn't like the tunes, and the Broadway people didn't like the so-called pretentious symphonic music. John
Hmm.
Adams, as you remember, had the same problem when he tried to do something that was sophisticated in the musical, but you have to keep the audience in mind.
Yeah.
So
And
this,
that one, just for folks at home, the John Adams, it was what was it? It was I looked up.
I was looking at the ceiling and I saw
That's
the
right.
sky.
Yeah, which I just re-listened to and is absolutely incredible. I mean,
Well,
divine, but I can understand though where I mean probably now in certain venues, and it should be revived, but yeah, it's
yes.
musical people would think it's too operatic, operatic people would think it's too musical. Yeah. Yeah.
There
And
seems to be two different audiences. I mean, that sounds crazy. I know on FM classical radio, the listeners do not like vocal music.
that's interesting. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because the cliche is that, oh, well, ballet people love opera and opera people, it's singers, so you must like Broadway. And yes, and yet there's this, underlying, again, sort of I like this and this is not that mentality that goes through it. I wanna say though, one thing you taught me about specifically opera at this time was that there was a lot of ballet in opera. Like it would stop and then there would just be like a 20-minute, divertissement or a tableau of some kind, just to be performed. I mean, yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
That is a, well, it started with the grand French operas,
Hmm.
where there had to be a whole act of ballet dancing. I
Hmm.
mean, or the audience would tear up the place.
Yeah.
When Wagner's opera Tannhäuser was premiered in Paris, they said, and of course, where will the ballet come in this? And ballet, Wagner said, are you crazy? Just get me any ballet music in this piece. No, there
Ton,
must be, and there will be.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tannhauser, by the way, already what 3.5, 4 hours, and
Yes.
they wanted more ballet, and they wanted to put a ballet in.
So he said, okay, I'll put it, excuse me, at the very beginning of the work where it kind of makes sense. That was problematic, but so many people arrived late at the opera because they were just interested in hearing the ballet. So people were sitting there at the second hour. Where's the ballet? Where's the ballet? Boo! Total scandal.
I love that. I love
Total
that.
scandal.
I love that.
Italy, there were things like that too, but
Mhm.
somewhat more rarely. For instance, Verdi's penultimate opera is Othello, which
Mhm.
is a tragic work. But
Yes.
he was told for the Paris production, you're going to have to write some ballet music. What? I mean, Desdemona is going to do a dance of death. What are
Right.
we talking about here? So he did write a 10-minute ballet, which is pretty good, but no one would dare think of doing it today because it's just a diverting kind of
Yes.
intrusion. So
Yeah.
that's true of not so much, well, some Russian operas had ballet, and then you have the case of England where I can't even find a ballet. It wasn't a ballet country.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I've seen Iolanta. I saw it on a double bill. The Metropolitan Opera did it with Bluebeard's Castle, the great
Mhm.
Bartok opera. And it's not related at all. I'm watching it. I'm watching it, and it's a really beautiful, piece and well acted. Anna Netrebko, I think, was doing it.
That's right.
But it's and not I didn't actually know that it was on a double bill when I had with Nutcracker when I had seen it, but now looking back, like here's this tragic opera about just this woman who is desperate to be loved
Blind,
and blind. Yep, exactly. And it's it's just heart-wrenching. And to start the evening off, here were dancing mice
dancing
and
mice, right?
yeah, it's just, yeah, I would be a little, it's an artistic whiplash at that point. Yeah. But I'd be pissed too. I mean, 4 hours, geez, my gosh. Yeah.
People had different expectations, so it was truly an evening at the theater. And if they got cheated by an hour, they felt cheated.
Well, and
Yeah.
I would be upset as well because it's it's not, Iolanta has a lot of plot within the intimacy of how few characters there are. I think there's about four or five, maybe.
Yes.
Um, there's no plot in Nutcracker. Like you
No.
said, there's barely a journey. I mean, the journey is the fantastical going into the world, from the real world.
Mhm.
But it never gets resolved, right? Like, I mean, maybe she wakes up at the end. I know in some productions she gets, put in a sled and Santa's sled and sort of goes off. I think that's
Right.
the New York City Ballet one. I saw a fabulous production at School of the Arts where before. as the party guests are leaving, she and I guess Fritz, or no,
Yes, her
not Fritz.
brother,
No, not Fritz. It's
right,
whoever the Nutcracker, whoever Drosselmeyer's, you know, nephew,
protege. We'll call
protege,
him that.
right, or whomever. Um, yeah, they're both reaching for each other as if it's this sort of like early young love kind of idea. And the final image at the end, after, as the finale is happening, is back to them reaching out to each other. So it's almost like they see each other and then they see this life and world that they have. But then none of that's in it. None of that's in the original. None of that's written down. That's all
No,
just brilliant directors.
in the original, Marie, by the way, she's called Clara in the ballet. No,
Yes.
I do not know why. She's 7 years old in the original ETA Hoffman and I think Dumas version.
Hmm.
So, but you obviously you can't have a 7-year-old girl dancing a pas de deux with a grown man. So they usually make her seem like what a. So this could be an issue, as you already said, of sexual awakening.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. But so people try to give it depth where it's not there really in the music, certainly not the plot, but there is the pas de deux, which is between Clara and the Nutcracker, the end of Act Two near.
No, it's the Cavalier and the Sugar Plum Fairy, which is, again, it's never explained, but you're assuming that it's, a version of them when they're older. Yeah. So, I mean, but we talked about it. I think, there's a lot of this sort of idea of discovery of love,
Yeah.
or connection of some point. Again, we don't know if it's love, it's just some connection. So, but yeah, there's no plot.
And you mentioned the Sugar Plum Fairy.
Yes.
Wow. That must have stunned the audience when they first heard it. Tchaikovsky, as we've talked about, went to Paris and he heard about someone had invented a new instrument called celesta or celeste
Hmm.
in French. Celeste means heavenly or divine. This is a tiny piano. I can't describe the dimensions so well, but it's like a
Yeah.
tiny piano with only notes in the very highest register. Had just been invented. And Tchaikovsky was told by Petipa, I want something to sound like sprinkling water or from a fountain, something like that. So Tchaikovsky hears these beep, 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 that kind of
Well,
thing.
let's also explain. Like it's smaller, right? It's small. It's kind of toy piano-esque.
Yeah, toy piano.
And
Yes.
is it that the chord it's struck up, right? Or is it struck up instead of down, I believe, from like a piano, but it's much smaller and it's very rare that people have a real one because most of the time
Right.
it's on a synth keyboard or there's something that's actually an electronic celesta sound.
Mhm.
So it's very, very rare. Yeah.
But it sounds like nothing else. That's a keyboard instrument, not a piano, not a harpsichord. It's like bells or a glockenspiel, a toy piano is a good way to describe it. So he said to his publisher, "Look, buy this instrument. I want to use it before anyone else in Russia hears about it. Keep this a secret."
Hmm.
And so the first time this instrument was heard in Russia was the premiere of the Nutcracker. Now we don't know what the audience's reaction was, but I can imagine they were looking at the pit. What's it? What
Yeah.
instrument is that?
I think what's great about it, what I love about that story in particular is exactly what you mentioned, which is it had never ever been heard before. So I always think, and I remember when I would give backstage tours at Nutcracker, I would tell people like it's hard for us to imagine like hearing something for the first time, right? Like a sound that we've never heard before. So, whenever you hear that, as many times, however many times you've heard Sugar Plum Fairy, like just imagine hearing that for the first time. It's pretty incredible.
It is. And I have a personal story about that. I started off on clarinet
Hmm.
in seventh grade band, and I was pretty terrible. But in the Christmas show, they were going to do the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. That's a bass clarinet. And so I called myself the soloist that night. Uh,
Hmm.
it just occurred to me this version sounds more eerie and spooky than other versions. So anyway, there's a reason for this in general. The celeste in the highest register, and then what is this macabre instrument in the bass?
Yeah.
This is no accident. This
It's
is
very,
thinking.
very dark. Yes. Yeah. And I mean it's a great lesson in orchestration,
Oh
right?
my God.
Contrasting sounds and again, something very high and then something very low to connect it. It's fantastic. I love too that in in the Act One finale, so Dance of the Snowflakes, he
Yeah.
puts is it a children's chorus? Like what is there's a random voices just appear out of nowhere, which is also pretty amazing. Um,
It,
yeah, yeah. Can you
it
explain what
is.
those are?
There have never been voices used in ballet, right?
Right.
For obvious
Yeah.
reasons. So where does this come from? Tchaikovsky worshipped Bizet's Carmen.
Hmm.
And near the very beginning, the boys are doing a soldier's chorus and marching, much like
Hmm.
the Nutcracker.
Right.
Kids are
Right.
pretending their toys are soldiers. So no doubt he was inspired by Bizet's example, and he did something similar in his penultimate opera, The Queen of Spades. That's an opera where children's voices are used. But
Hmm.
here it is used in a ballet. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned we rarely hear a real celesta in the pit, and it's the same with voices. A synthesizer has a sound of children's voices, or it's
Hmm.
hard to find a children's chorus. They really want to do 8 performances in one week. Their
Well,
parents will allow that
for one moment, basically.
for three
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, so that's a problem. But when you hear it the first time, and what's more perfect in the children's fairy tale than the sound of children singing?
Well, yeah, exactly. And it makes so much sense. Again, because they are, and it's taking place in a moment in the story when Clara and the Nutcracker Prince are moving over into the land of the sweets. And
Hmm.
there's the snow flurry that takes them over.
Yeah.
So again, it's the, saying goodbye to childhood, so to speak, and into adulthood. Um, the other thing that struck the two of us is the tree music, which is excellent, excellent. I mean, that's the thing that people forget about Nutcracker is that there's very little dancing in Act One because it's all tableau with the children, the party scene, and there's
Mime, is that the right word? Pantomime?
pantomime, that's right, yeah. And it's only pantomime, but it has some of the best music
Absolutely.
in the entire thing. And it's again, if you listen to it, how connected everything is. And like you also mentioned, the simplicity of it all. That's really hard to do. I mean, it's very hard to write that. But then you get into the tree music, the battle music, and then of course the end of Act One is really tough, and the orchestra never stops.
Right. Like I said, to conduct Act One, you had better be focused. And one issue about Nutcracker performances, sometimes you do six in a weekend, and
Yeah.
everyone gets a little bit, thinking they know it, and you can throw the orchestra off. The waltz of the snowflakes is just incredibly difficult. And you mentioned the tree music, which has a depth to it and it's scary at the same time, probably influenced by Wagner, because that brass writing for that, he hadn't done that before, but he had been at the premiere of Wagner's Ring Cycle, a
Hmm.
14-hour cycle of operas, and you can hear the influence of Wagner in that.
Yeah. What was the critical reception like when it came out?
It polarized people. Some said it was wonderful. Uh, Tchaikovsky said, here's the quote. Like I said, the czar asked him to come to his box during the intermission. That's quite
Hmm.
an honor for the czar to.
Yeah.
And Tchaikovsky's quote here: "His Majesty was delighted, and invited me to his box. Of the staging, costumes, etc., Tchaikovsky wrote, the ballet was staged almost too magnificently. Their sheer splendor was literally a sight for sore eyes." So he may have felt that his music was secondary, as it were, to the lavish expense of these scenes.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think that it was not universally accepted, but also we didn't the version that in terms of costumes and set design, from what I understand, it was so different than what we know today because Balanchine was really the one who sort of made it into what it is when he brought it over in 1954.
And people don't know this is actually a late work by Tchaikovsky. I think
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
2 years left.
Yeah. Because what was his last ballet before this one?
Sleeping Beauty, which is about
Okay.
5, 6 years before then.
Yeah.
And then he dies in 1892, three. It's not performed in Russia again until 1914. So this is not a
Wow.
success. It's
Yeah.
forgotten. Now,
Yeah.
maybe, by the way, the suite, he conducted the premiere of the suite. I didn't know that until I did this research. And at the premiere, the audience demanded that five of the pieces be repeated,
Oh, wow.
which gets us to the subject of we know the word encore, which in our lexicon means an additional piece will be played at the end of the show. No, in operas, when they said encore, that meant you sang that again
Wow.
and maybe
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And same with symphonies. If they wanted to hear a movement again, they let
Mhm.
you know. So the audience participation was an
Yeah.
interesting idea. They had some kind of effect over what you're going to hear. So they wouldn't stop applauding until you repeated Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy or whatever.
Yeah. When did this become kind of a holiday thing? Because when we were doing the notes, you had sent over performances again into the 20th century. So 1914, I think the Ballet Russe was what, 34? Um,
I think that's right. I think it's right.
yeah.
It didn't make much of an effect on people. And right, Balanchine took it seriously. In fact, he called it Tchaikovsky's masterpiece.
Wow.
I have a big thick book called Balanchine Tchaikovsky, and he knew. I mean, Balanchine could play piano and could compose.
Yeah.
And he was a
Yeah.
total musician and not just, as it were, a dancer. So for him to say Nutcracker is Tchaikovsky's masterpiece, I would like to see the original production. But it was a huge hit, and gradually, when people saw the artistic and financial success with the New York City Ballet of this, people say, hey, let's do a Nutcracker this Christmas and see what happens. And from that point on, you have like, I don't know, how many times do you think the people in the Seattle Ballet Orchestra have performed Nutcracker?
Oh gosh, I mean, or New York City Ballet or any of the other companies, San Francisco. I mean, the Nutcracker is the one sort of or one of the biggest economic drivers of ballet
Yes.
companies across North America, even. I would go as far as to say North America, Canada included. Because of Balanchine and New York City Ballet, it became a holiday tradition. So everyone goes and sees it, like we sort of talked about earlier. And orchestra players must play. They play it every year. So if you have an in-house orchestra like Pacific Northwest Ballet or New York City Ballet, yeah, you're probably playing that at least
Hundreds
80,
of times.
80 times a year. So,
Certainly 60 times, it's certainly
at least
60 times a year
60.
at the
Yeah.
big center. So you add that up, and for me, I conducted, believe it or not, exactly 100 performances.
Well, and I know a lot of orchestral players, I mean, in pits and symphony orchestras who do say it's like playing it for the first time every single time.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it's hard for us to imagine or just people to imagine because you're just like, well, you're playing the same thing every single time. It's like, well, yeah, but if it's good, and I mean, I know, having been in pits for music for musicals and operas, yeah, even if it's the 10th time or 100th time, you're gonna if it's good, you'll find something new. And
I had
you're not gonna get totally bored,
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned, an orchestra can do six performances in 3 days, a matinee and evening performance. And
Yeah.
when I first came here, I started doing Nutcrackers, and I noticed that the orchestra was taking it easy during the
Hmm.
matinee. Makes some kind of sense to save themselves for the evening. But no,
Sure.
that's not me. These
Yeah.
people are hearing it maybe for the first time in the audience, or maybe for the last time.
Yeah.
And the piece deserves full attention. So I don't make a big speech. I just lead by example.
Yeah.
And when I did conducted the Charlotte Ballet, the choreographer noticed that. He said, the more energy you are putting into it, the more energy you're getting back from the
Hmm.
orchestra. Now, the amount of
Yeah.
repetition of Nutcrackers, it seems like this cash cow will never die. But I thought in when late 70s, early 80s, that let's have something different for Christmas. So I created something in my mind. I went to the head of the Baltimore Ballet. I said, I've got the greatest idea ever. Instead of Nutcracker every year, you alternate it with a ballet based on Dickens' A Christmas Carol,
Hmm.
using music, unknown music by Tchaikovsky, and my orchestrations of various piano pieces, songs, and string quartets. So 2 hours of great, fabulous music by Tchaikovsky, Dickens' A Christmas Carol. What do you think? He said, we're okay with Nutcracker.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it when it comes to
Exactly.
Nutcracker. Yes, yeah. And Christmas Carol, that's also, yeah, that's like cash cow for theaters. A lot of theaters do Christmas Carol. Also, we have to also say like the economics of this public domain, and so anyone can sort of create their own version of, the Nutcracker. It doesn't have to be the Balanchine one, and the Balanchine Trust owns the choreography for that, so you can't do it. But yeah, it's so fascinating to see how yes, it will never die. Even after COVID, we saw that
Right.
Nutcracker never died. In fact, it came back bigger than ever after the pandemic. Yeah.
So you were in Seattle during COVID
Yes.
with working with the ballet, and I'm sure people were afraid that there wouldn't be the attendance, but you said it was better or
Well,
about the same.
people came back after COVID. Yes, yeah. I mean, they didn't perform during COVID,
Oh,
you
I
know.
forgot that. Okay.
So I mean, this brings us to after the Nutcracker, there were a lot of things in pop culture. I mean, Duke Ellington did his own Nutcracker suite.
Hmm.
Um, there was Mark Morris, The Hard Nut, which filmed and got on PBS. So a lot of people got to see that. What were some other significant sort of pop culture moments for Nutcracker that you remember?
There's a movie that you could talk on because I haven't seen it. The Macaulay Culkin one that is Balanchine choreography or not.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I mentioned that earlier. It's New York City Ballet's production. Yes. Hmm.
So of course there've been black, productions and Harlem
Hmm.
Ballet.
Yep.
So it's infinitely capable of adaptation because there's not much plot there. There's not much specific plot there. So if as long as it's respectful about the music and it's doesn't detract from the quality of the music, I'm okay with rethinking these pieces. You can put Nutcracker on the moon if it's done well and respectfully.
So why do you think it continues to endure with itself? I mean, we talked about obviously for ballet companies, the cash cow of it all, but there is, again, if there was something better, people might do something better, but there's obviously not. So we're going to keep doing Nutcracker. Why do you think it is?
Well, I think it's just that. I mean, there is no Christmas ballet or Christmas opera, though people used to do Hansel and Gretel as the Christmas opera, but Hansel and Gretel has nothing to do with Christmas.
Yeah.
So Handel's Messiah. Look,
Mm.
I do think that's his greatest work, but there are other pieces by him that, are up there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they don't get any attention because they're not box office.
Hmm.
So this is what it is. The music business is a business, I hate to say, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, this is true. But I'm grateful that, mind you, when I was born, there was no recording yet of the Nutcracker, the whole ballet.
Not even the Previn version, because
No,
you mentioned that Swan Lake a while ago, that recording of Swan Lake. Wasn't that the Previn version?
no, that was early. The
Oh,
prom
earlier.
was
Okay.
later. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
and I say Previn because Andre Previn and the London Symphony issued a lot of these full, complete recordings of ballets and such for commercial, distribution. So, wow, there was no complete one. What was the first? Do you remember? One of the earliest?
that's a great question. I do
Yeah.
not. And speaking of Wagner's Ring Cycle, there was no recording of that when I was born. It was only 10 years later that finally. So this is
Yeah.
early recorded history. And as I said, I'm grateful for this. Virtually everything that's good, even, has
Hmm.
been recorded. If I
Yeah.
wanted to hear the 1812 Overture, my favorite piece when I was 14, every
Hmm.
boy's favorite classical piece, because of the violins and the canons, I would have to spend $5.25 of my own money, and did, to hear it. Now you can tune into YouTube, to name an example.
Yeah.
There are 50 versions for free. So
Yeah.
this music will always last. If some of it disappears from live performance, I'm not going to cry about that. The important thing
Well,
is the music will be preserved forever, and there will always be curious people like you and me and other people that will say, "Hey, I wonder what that Shakespeare play is about. I don't know anything about that. Maybe
yeah.
it's good."
Yeah, the accessibility of all the recordings, but also how how many people have recorded Nutcracker. I mean, we talked about that too, where and we'll take a listen to maybe two different versions of the overture, but it's pretty great to see people still trying new things, new interpretations. Even though, of course, it's like, or not, of course, but you say, of course, no, we just go back and listen to these old recordings. And what's wrong with those? It's the Nutcracker. And yet you get, people like Gustavo Dudamel and the LA Philharmonic and Simon Rattle coming out with new recordings of these classics. It's also very daring. Like, we all know and love Nutcracker, so why do a new recording?
And also, one thing we've talked about, art is highly subjective. I cannot
Mhm.
prove that Mozart's Symphony Number One that he wrote when he was 6
Yeah.
is not as good as his final symphony that he wrote.
Right.
You can
Right.
talk, well, of course, it's played more often and it's more substantial and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But you cannot prove that. And what bonds us together, among other things, is that line from Meredith Willson's The Music Man.
Hmm.
Marion, the librarian, is talking about what her future husband, what she would like to see from her future husband.
Yes.
And she
Yeah.
says, of course, and if he would occasionally ponder what makes Beethoven and Shakespeare great, not will he attend a symphony with me or Romeo and Juliet, but what's how can you explain the greatness of Nutcracker and the fact that it's an eternal piece? And
Yeah.
we do the dive into it, and
Yep.
still it's elusive.
It still is, and it's still going to mean something different for anyone listening to this or anyone
True.
going to experience it. They'll get something, but they'll get something out of it and they'll feel different and appreciate it in some way. That's also why I like, as much as the Nutcracker is over, not overdone. I don't want to say that, but like over talked about, like it's so much in our sort of DNA. I mean, it's a lot like the Christmas movies that we love to watch at Christmas time. Like, yeah, every minute of it, but when you go back and watch it, every single year, or in this case, listen to it, hopefully you can find something different. I mean, I do try to listen to Nutcracker every Christmas because I want to hear I want to hear something new in it this year.
Yes.
Um,
And the same with great movies. I see
mhm.
Gone with the Wind every decade, and it's a totally different experience,
Yeah.
20 than 70.
Yeah. And so I hope people go back to Nutcracker at some point because it's still really fantastic to hear. Let's hear a little bit. You chose some selections of overtures and we'll link up all of Bill's links, Maestro's links to overtures. Um, but do you want to set up the Simon Rattle and we'll listen to about a minute and a half of it?
This is insider stuff, but the tempo of the overture is crucial because some of it is so difficult to play for the strings and the woodwinds. And conductors sometimes aren't thinking of that. And so this is about as fast as you can perform this piece cleanly. And it's
Hmm.
with the Berlin Philharmonic, which is one of the world's great five orchestras. So they have no problems with it. But lesser musicians, even very good ones, have a problem with it.
And this is, as we mentioned, sort of a newer recording.
Yeah,
So it had been quite a while since a major conductor had put out a complete recording
right.
of it. So this was also a pretty iconic recording when it came out. And Rattle is nothing if not incredibly professional and respectful for everything he does. I mean, his Porgy and Bess is quite lovely and an iconic recording as well. So, all right, let's listen to about a minute and a half, and then you can sort of point out to folks, some of the things that Rattle was doing that maybe is non-traditional.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's Simon Rattle, the overture. What's I think one thing that always strikes me about listening to his recording in particular is the extreme emotion and emotive playing that he gets out of the Berlin Philharmonic for that. Because again, we know the overture as a very I just it's kind of everything should is usually played at one dynamic, but here you know he's getting them you know just crescendoing and just playing really forcefully. It's great. It's fantastic to hear it so expressive and with so much character.
That's an excellent point. I conducted an orchestra once that'll be nameless, and it was kind of like business as usual, slugging through it. So I started to conduct all these nuances that you
Hmm.
just mentioned that are in
Yeah.
the score that are neglected because, oh, we know this piece.
Yeah.
They don't see
Yeah.
it anymore. All the things that go louder and suddenly lighter, and the accents and the viola chattering, very
Hmm.
clean.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
entrance of the triangle, which is the only percussion instrument, in this
That's
overture.
right. That's right. No timpani. Yeah.
No timpani. So he does play everything as printed, but that's a rarity, unfortunately. It's like
Hmm.
I complained once when I was conducting a rehearsal of Leroy Anderson's Sleigh Ride, which I probably conducted 900 times, as has the orchestra. And you have to like go back to the workshop and say, hey, look, let's look at this from scratch.
Yeah.
All these nuances are important. And by the way, this is an eternal masterpiece. I really had a thrilling rehearsal once. I said, this piece will outlast all of us. We're going to be dusty photos in someone's album in 100 years, but still the Roy Anderson sleigh ride is going to be present. True.
Yeah. That sounds like a threat, by the way. So I would be upset if I was a player hearing that. It sounds like a threat. What are you trying to say? Yeah. Uh,
I've said
but
worse.
you're right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we'll get into that later
No, no.
in the podcast. As we sort of wrap up, you have another one, which was, I think, you had chosen a few, but let's listen to it. This was Fusion.
That's how it's
What
described.
what is this?
That's how it's
Okay.
described. I don't know what the word fusion means, but I thought it was fun.
But set it up for the people who are listening. This is a guitarist and a drummer. We're playing this for everyone to hear a different version, how the overture has evolved into pop culture. So yeah,
So it's some. I'm sure the first pop version was the Duke Ellington version with
that's
Billy
right.
Strayhorn,
Hmm.
where da 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 da.
Right. It's a little swung. Yeah.
Right. And this is a I don't know hard rock or what you kids are calling it
What the
version.
kids are calling it. Well, okay, let's listen to a bit of it to hear what Maestro chose from this. Listen, I want 15 more hours of that. That's great.
And it's so respectful. They don't change one
No, no,
note.
no. Exactly, exactly.
Chords are the same. The melody is the same. By the way, these guys can play.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And that's shout out to, I think it's Marcus Wayner, Wanner on YouTube. Great, fantastic. Okay, well, as we sort of wrap, I have one more for you, Bill. Um, so we've been talking about good music, and now we have to listen to Dance of Sugar Plum Fairy by the Portsmouth Symphonia, which we will explain to the audience after they hear it and why what it is. But we'll I just want to play this for everyone at home as kind of the last thing we do, and then we'll explain what it is. I'm back in middle school band again.
Wow.
Oh,
And this is a London-based group, and the idea was they were all instrumentalists, but the violin players would take up the trumpet and vice versa. They were all
yeah.
playing on instruments they could barely play at all. And I don't know whether they had sheet music or they were just trying to remember what it sounds like, but these destruction of these works is hysterical because unfortunately we've all heard less than perfect ensembles sound not too far removed from that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Boy, but you were so great. You were so great. Yeah. Yes.
Mom and dad thought you were great.
Yeah, right. Oh no, we were recording Little Jimmy. Yes, the
Yeah.
entire concert. Yeah. No, I had to end on that because I knew that they had done Sugar Plum Fairy. I don't. They may have done other Nutcrackers, but I'm not. No.
We don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I don't know. Now I want to hear it. So.
Yeah. But it's funny. It's funny. And it's supposed to be humorous. It's not anything that's disrespectful.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts on Nutcracker or anything that people should listen to, watch, to learn more about it or to come to appreciate it a little bit more?
I think you already said something very important. To come back to a work and try to listen to it with fresh ears.
Hmm.
Oh, I already know that. As Bruno Walter, a great conductor, said, some people see a sunrise and they say, I've seen that before. I
Sure.
remember I was studying Schubert's Unfinished Symphony, one of the most famous pieces in the repertoire, and I'd done it about 8 times. And I had the score out on the piano. And one day I walked into my study and I looked at the score and suddenly realized I didn't really ever realize the beginning of the piece is stuck in the worst kind of mental depression you can imagine. All of a sudden I
You mean
saw it.
the tone, the sound of it is like that. Yeah.
Bleak.
Hmm.
And I had never, I saw it's pianissimo, it's B minor, but wait a minute, what is being portrayed here?
Hmm.
And so I had a whole different conception of that work that I already knew from that point on. So it's helpful to have a fresh ear. I knew a conductor that did Handel's Messiah about 300 times. Wonderful. And after the last performance in Indianapolis, John Nelson said, "What are you going to do now?" He said, "I'm going to destroy my score and all the orchestral parts because I want to completely do this with fresh ears."
Yeah. Yeah. I always had a saying to my friends who'd never seen a really great movie. And I said, "Oh, I'm so jealous you get to watch that for the first time." And it's so true. The things that we love, it's like you wish you could go back and hear it again. And I think that's the funny thing. I think people think that they will go back and hear Nutcracker as a masterpiece, but just listen to it. I mean, and appreciate it. You might not think it's a masterpiece, and that's okay, but at least go back and give it another chance. Yeah.
And if you've seen the ballet version a number of times, why not listen to just the instrumental version?
Yeah, or go see it again. Again, you remember the parts that either moved you or that didn't move you, but to see it all, especially something that's a masterpiece, like this, it's worth it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you for suggesting this theme, and I'm looking
Yeah,
forward
well,
to whatever manic thing we can get into.
we haven't figured out what we're doing next time, but I'm sure it'll be something holiday related. Or I know February we're gonna do love stories, so we're gonna do some scandals and things around love for in classical music and movies and such. But yeah, no, this has been great.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and stick with us.